With all of the interest in the proposal for a so-called voice to Parliament, my next guest has a story to tell that is really important. Casey Costello is a New Zealand Maori woman, and she's visiting Australia with a chilling message about what we can expect in the bundle of race-based rights and institutions that are proposed by the Uluru Statement. Now, to be upfront, the New Zealand experience of the Waitangi Treaty isn't a perfect match for the proposal on the table for Australia. But it does give us a clear picture of where this package of policies that prioritise race over our shared humanity will take us. Casey, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Amanda.
Casey, many people in Australia are open to the idea of supporting race-based institutions and rights and treaties and tribunals because they, with good and sincere intentions, want to see better outcomes for Indigenous Australians. How has this good intention played out in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's the key point here, is that the good intention has to extrapolate out to outcome, and what we've lost sight of is outcome. And as long as we differentiate how we allocate resource, how we allocate services, fundamentally on race, we miss the mark, because the assumption is that all Maori are in need and all those in need are Maori, and we miss the point. Not all Maori are in need. A lot of us are doing really well, and what this allocation has done is it's funded an industry effectively of reparation, of treaty settlement, of well-intentioned, and removed the democratic accountability for when you don't deliver, you get kicked out.
So tell us more about those implications for democracy and accountability.
So as we've shifted, which I think is where the similarity for New Zealand comes, is we've now started a dialogue of co-governance. Recently, the government has tried to distance themselves from the term co-governance, inferring that it's just a branding issue, that people have misunderstood. The government has failed to actually define what co-governance means. But effectively, it's a partnership model, which is what you're referring to in the voice frequently, is a partnership whereby better decisions will be made because Māori will have a greater voice. And that's just not occurring. What's occurring is a self-appointed, elitist kind of minority is advocating that they speak for all of us, and the outcomes aren't being achieved. It's not being achieved in any of the measures, and in fact, in some areas, we've got worse.
And when that elite takes hold and claims to speak for everybody, what does that do for the lives of those people who don't feel like they're being spoken for and who aren't getting the benefits of that consultation process?
Yeah, that's the disillusionment that occurs, because it's perpetuating a narrative that you're predetermined for failure based upon your race. And that's the worst thing you can do to our young people, is deprive them of aspiration by saying that you cannot achieve on merit, that we need this special institution, the special representation, this idea that you're kind of going to be not given a hand up, but a continuous hand out, and that those that claim to represent these most at need, they have the perfect opportunity to deny any culpability for failing to deliver, because they blame things like systemic racism and colonisation for the failure to deliver. So we just end up with a downward spiral of welfare dependency, of no tangible benefit. And I think that, similar to Australia, Māori are very family focused, those solutions need to come from the individuals at an individual level, not well-intentioned narrative claiming to speak for us that deliver no tangible outcomes.
Can you give us, Casey, some examples of how this has played out?
Well, one of the most stark examples, I think, most recently is we have Ministry for Children, which is Oranga Tamariki. And several years back, they decided that they would, the better outcomes will be delivered by determining that at-risk children need to be placed with iwi and whānau and hapu, the family unit for Maori. And the latest report in February, which was reporting on the performance of Aoranga Tamariki, said that they had failed in every area to actually deliver better outcomes for children, to the extent we had a recent case where a young child from the age of 4 had been in care from a non-Māori family till the age of 7 and was thriving. They ended up having to go to the High Court to protect the child from having to be returned to an environment that they couldn't confirm was safe. And Aoranga Tamariki were trying to push for that. Now, statistically, this is showing that this idea of race-based division is failing, and it's failing our most vulnerable, our children. The same has occurred with our prison population, which was one of the big issues that we had to address, and this idea that these initiatives would change, and it's achieved nothing. Māori male prison population is still 50% Māori and 65% for women. Now, this we've had years of these initiatives.
Casey, can I ask you this? Has it impacted the work of the courts? Has the presence of treaty and these measures affected the activism that you've seen from the bench?
Yeah, and that was one of the ones that was highlighted recently, where the Supreme Court took into account tikanga Māori, which is the idea of our traditions and our protocols, was introduced into the court system to determine an outcome in a court case. Now, that's like taking things that are so intangible into the court system. We've introduced the idea of having cultural impact in sentencing. If an offender is determined to have been, affected by colonisation, that impacts their sentence. Now, these are stuff that are, as a victim of crime, how do you combat these things? How do you, law should be the law for all, it's the same, no differentiation. And how do you combat that?
That's a good message, isn't it?
I believe it.
That's a good message, Casey.
And it's really dangerous, and I think Casey, that's my caution.
Casey, we're out of time, I'm afraid. I'm so grateful for your insights today, and I wish you the very best as you try and convince parliamentarians this week of how important it is to not fall into the trap of thinking this is just benign and goodwill. All the best.